Welcome everyone from We're So Young podcast. This is Diana. Thanks for coming back for another episode. Today we have Vanessa Garcia, who is a writer, a playwright, a mother. What else are you, Vanessa?
Everything you said. Yeah, I'm a writer. I think I'm a writer with the soul of a painter. Visual art was my first love, and I think that infuses everything. But in terms of writing, yeah, I'm a playwright, a journalist. I write fiction, nonfiction, long form, short form, for kids and adults, and so like the whole gamut. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about like your life story. Like, how did this come about, especially going from art to writing? And I mean, it's all related. Art is intermixed, but how did you come about it?
Well, visual art was in my life always, and writing was too. I mean, it was part of growing up. Like, my grandfather's family were tapestry makers in Spain. They actually renovated a lot of the Civil War tapestries that were destroyed. And so, like, when I went to visit for the first time, visit family in Spain, I could see all of the tapestries that they had actually rescued and put together, and it was really, really cool. And so that was part of the conversation in my house always. And my grandfather taught me how to paint and taught me Shakespeare at like 10 years old, literally. And so it was always part of my life. And I studied writing and visual art, English and art history, really, as an undergrad. And I thought I was going to be a painter. And I ended up being a writer because I like writers better. I just liked hanging out with writers a lot better than I did in terms of like socializing with and being with. I collaborated better with writers, but at the same time, I was always around theater people, and so my college roommate and everyone around me were actors, and so I started to write for them and got obsessed with writing plays. That's when I lived in New York.
Where did you go to school for undergrad?
I went to Barnard College.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
I actually went to Brown for a week and hated it. I went, and it was a really hard decision to leave because I had a full ride and they were paying me. And so I thought, oh my God, when I got there, I was like, this is the wrong decision. This is not the school for me. This is not the school for me. And so I took a semester off and worked at Books and Books and wrote my first novel, which I'm really glad never got out and saw the light. It's in a drawer, thank God. But it taught me how to write. And also I took that semester off, and then I started Barnard the very next semester.
Okay.
And I studied English and art history there, and then stayed in New York for 7 years working for what had been my senior seminar professor as his assistant.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Did you do any writing while you were working for him?
Yeah, I was doing the whole thing ended up being an apprenticeship. It really was an apprenticeship. Like, cool. He asked me to be his assistant. I was like, no, I'm really bad at that. I'm not going to do that. And he was like, well, there's always the future. And then he asked me again, and he explained that it would involve research and helping him. And basically I learned how to live like a writer by working with him.
That's so important.
Yeah, it was amazing. And I ended up going to Bellagio, Italy, not the one in Las Vegas, to a conference, like creating conferences. I helped with a class that he created called The Literature of the Middle Passage, and we ended up taking students to Ghana in West Africa.
What?
Yeah. So, and then he traveled a lot, which I do now, and I feel like it taught me how to be a writer in the world and what it means to spread the thing that you make.
Yeah, isn't it amazing what travel does? Yeah. It just like opens up all these doors. Yeah. You think you know things until you travel, and then you're...
Totally. And everywhere you go, people are so different and exactly the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I like very much about your writing is you're very culture-based, you know, and I think that obviously travel has so much to do with it. Can you talk a little bit about your background?
Yeah, so I'm super Cuban. My whole family's Cuban. My grandfather's from Spain, but he calls himself Cuban because I feel like he fell in love with Cuba when he moved there, and then
I fell in love with Cuba when I left. I never wanted to leave.
Did you just go recently?
Yeah, I went this year.
Are you partially Cuban also, or no?
I grew up in Hialeah, so I'm like Cuban by association.
Yeah, exactly, by osmosis, right?
Yeah.
Like everybody in Miami. It's just like everybody in Miami sounds Cuban at some point, you know? But yeah, so my parents are Cuban, and although I didn't go to Cuba until I was in my 30s, I spent 15 years trying to convince my mother to go to Cuba, and she finally did. And she was 50, and she hadn't been there since she was 5. And so it was
it's a big deal, especially people that left when they were young. Yeah.
It was a massive, wonderful, beautiful, heartbreaking, amazing, just a trip, you know.
Did you write anything based off of your trip there?
Yes. So I wrote a couple of articles right away. I've gone 3 times to Cuba, 3 going on 4, knock on wood, soon now in the next year. But the first time I went, I wrote an article about the journey with my mother, and then the second time I took the first cruise ship that went to Cuba specifically to write about it.
What cruise ship was that?
It was Carnival.
Yeah.
Now I've forgotten the name. Oh my God, how terrible my memory. But yeah, it was the first cruise ship that had traveled to Cuba in I don't know how many years, 5 decades basically. Yeah. And so I wrote about that for a publication, and then I'm basically just finished a novel that includes all of those travels and what it's like to go back to Cuba, and my agent has it now. We'll see what happens.
You have a few books published though, right?
I have a novel that's published called White Light, and this book that's based in Cuba, it's based in Cuba, Miami, is the same character. Even though,
cool.
It's the same central character, but they can live on their own. So you don't have to read the first one to read the second one, but it'll enrich it if you do.
Oh, awesome.
And then I have, plays published in anthologies and stories and tons of journalism and all of that stuff.
So can you talk a little bit about the plays that you've written? Any play in particular that you think that really hones in on your culture and like what that's about, and if it was produced, where it was produced, and
I think the play that has my heart and the project that has my heart now is Amparo. It's the story of the real Havana Club, the Havana Club rum that was created by the Arechavala family in Cuba and was stolen by the Cuban government in 1959. And to this day, it is basically selling stolen goods in partnership with the French government. Not the French government, the Cuban government in partnership with a French company called Pernod Ricard all over the world. And so one of the family members from the Arechavala family managed to get the recipe out of Cuba and made a partnership, sold it to Bacardi.
Puerto Rico, right?
They make it in Puerto Rico, but they sold it to Bacardi, and Bacardi makes Havana Club that is sold in the United States. And the whole idea is to explain what the story is of the Arechavala family, and the story of that company. And basically it's the Cuban story and the story of every refugee and the story of everyone who has ever lost and loved something very deeply, especially home and family. And so it's just like completely, it takes over my life every time it comes in. It's had two pilot productions, one in Miami, one in New York. And
which went super well.
They went super well. They were like these test pilots for these experiential theater productions, and so now it's on to the next one, and then hopefully the next one and the next one, and we'll move on from there.
That's exciting. And that topic, it's so important, especially right now and what's going on in the world. You know what I mean? The idea of like family and being able to just like make it through, and moving to a different country, it's such an important story to be heard here.
Absolutely. And the central, the person who holds the story is the wife of the man who sold the recipe and her name is Amparo, which means refuge.
Yeah.
And so it's such, like, you couldn't make that stuff up, like her. And so that's why we're using that name, because just even that idea of what it means to create refuge, even what it means for the United States to create refuge, you know what I mean, in this particular moment in time, I think is really significant.
Yeah. Yeah. So being an artist in any capacity, it brings a lot of challenges, like you're lucky you got to do the apprenticeship, but was there any point in time that you can really pinpoint that you can say, man, I don't know if this is what I want, and like,
yeah.
how did you go about that, and what did you do?
I was really, 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 really broke for a very, 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 very long time. And to the point that to this day, when I am in a public restroom or a like bathroom at a Starbucks or something where there's extra toilet paper, my insides are like, go take the toilet paper because you need to take it home. Because I used to need to take toilet paper that I would see, It's just like, I didn't have enough money for toilet paper. I didn't have enough money for anything. I lived in a building where I would wake up and people would be handcuffed in the morning and there would be blood trickling down my doorsteps, like literally down the steps of my, I was going to work and there's the little trail of blood. So I never doubted my path in the sense of I felt like this is what I do. But it was really hard, it was really, really hard. I remember like a little brief moment where I was like, should I go to law school? But what I ended up doing instead is just saying, okay, what is the next thing that I need to do to survive in my craft? And I refused to ever get a job that didn't relate to what I did in some way, shape, or form. That's me personally. There are people that manage to have a day job that's totally different and then still work at night, and that's a different way. But I knew that for me, it had to be the same. And so I was just constantly doing that, and then I ended up thinking, okay, I'm going to get a PhD because the PhD stipend will pay for my life and pay me to be able to write this book that I want to write. And it was just like that, one thing after the other, after the other, after the other, until, the tide started to change a little, and all of a sudden things started to work out. But it felt very sudden, but at the same time, it felt like it took forever.
Yeah, it's one of those things I feel that things can be going really, really well, and then all of a sudden it switches, and then you're like, okay, give me air. Where's the, where's the oxygen? And then all of a sudden you just kind of see how that was so important, because I'm sure you wrote stuff during that time.
Oh, totally.
That's
always
so significant to your path as a writer,
Absolutely. I mean, I feel like I wrote some of the most interesting things during all of those moments, and they taught me how to write no matter what, and also there's like really like an earnestness and a total, I don't know, gut truth something to that writing that when I look at it, I think, wow, sometimes I can't believe I wrote some of that stuff.
Really?
Yeah. I'm like, whoa, Jesus. But yeah, that was all there. And the interesting thing is that I was working with a writer who was already famous, and
So that was your day job at the time.
Exactly. Yeah. Like I did a lot of his research, and it was exciting because he would publish a book, and then I would be thanked in the book, and I'd be like, okay, it's like little things that give you a little, steps along the way. But I would see how he lived, and it took like about 10 years after I stopped working with him, or a little bit more, for me to see myself in the place where he was at the time. And so, like to actually watch that journey happen, I didn't realize it would take so long, Yeah,
but looking back on it, it just makes so much sense.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
How did that affect your personal life?
The job?
Yeah.
At the time, I remember I wasn't even dating. I was like just working because I was working with him and then working on my own stuff, working with him, working on my own stuff, traveling a lot. I wasn't dating at the time. And then I remember I thought, okay, I have to get a life that's mine. And it's time to stop working for this other writer. And even though that was wonderful, like I can't say how amazing it was, but I came to Miami on a 6-month break to sort of like gather myself from what had been $30,000 of debt. And then I met someone. And then I feel like my personal life started to catch up with my, my work life. I met someone who I eventually married and divorced, but that's a long story. Yeah.
And so if you could say, aside from Cuba, another country that's really influenced your writing, or just a country that you went to that you're like, man, this is I could move here. I can make so much work just by like sitting on this dirt. You know, where would you say?
I really feel like everywhere I go, my whole thing is that, so when before I got married to my husband now, one of the conversations we had was like, my big thing is I have to travel to a new place every single year.
That's so amazing.
No matter what.
That's
it has to be new. So if we go to Argentina, and we've been to Argentina before, that's not the new place. You know what I mean? Like, it has to be a new place every single year. So that newness for me is everything. But I think the most recent place that I went to that was, you know, like magic, was New Zealand.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. It was it's just beautiful, you know, and it's just the most, like, it has so many landscapes and so many different climates, and then like there's
in one day.
Yes, totally.
You have it all. Yeah.
It's so magical. And I discovered my son's name there, and I feel like it already started to make its way into the novel about Cuba. So, you know, it does its thing, but it's also nice that it was so far away.
Yeah. There's something so special about like crossing the ocean and just feeling like, you know, connected to people, but also in such a disconnect and awe around new surroundings, you know, and I think that that's something really cool about going to that side of the world, because especially, you know, both of us, we have Hispanic influences, so even if we were to go to South America, Central America, there's still some familiarity to it, as opposed to going over there, you know, so that's, there's something different. I mean, when you start to play with time like that, and you're like, I'm a day ahead of you. Or like my friends in Australia, they're like, what is it, 15 hours? It's just like, it's just so much time. It's just another dimension. It's another world. They're in a different climate. They're like in summer. I just found out Santa Claus over there is like in shorts, and I'm just like, what?
The same. New Zealand is summer. We went in their summer, which was kind of like Miami's winter, but you know.
Miami's winter. We're in Miami's winter right now. Today it's 62 degrees.
I know.
November.
And when I opened the door, I was like, oh my God, it's so cold.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you know that everyone tomorrow, if it's still like this, it's like leather scarves jackets. and because it's the only time we have, really. Watch, I'm going to move somewhere really cold and be like, man.
Yeah.
So you started writing, you've been writing how long? Your entire life?
I've been writing forever, I mean, since forever. Since I was a kid.
Since you were a kid.
Yeah.
But...
but there's a difference between starting to write and having your debut novel out, you know?
How old were you when you got your novel out?
In my 30s. I was in my 30s. Now I can't remember, but it was 2015. Well, however old I was in 2015.
You're so young, it doesn't matter.
I know. So in my 30s at some point. And so I was looking on Twitter, and there's a writer that posts age at debut novel, and she lists a bunch of people: Daniel Defoe 59, Alex Haley 55, Sue Monk Kidd 54, Annie Proulx 57, and then she says me 50 with a little smiley face, you know. And it's like that. I just thought that was so wonderful. You know, it's like, God, all these people that have had these, I mean, roots, you know, like, what would we do without that? That was published at 55, apparently. Dear Lord. You know what I mean?
What did they go through to, like, have their transition and their, like, life fit them right at that moment? I think that that's something so beautiful, is the idea that, like, things can happen for you at any point in time, you know? And you can change paths at any point in time, because who's to say that their whole lives were, like, writing, you know?
No, yeah. Absolutely.
So that's cool.
Yeah, I thought that was really inspiring. I don't know if it's true because you haven't fact checked it, but
you know,
I'm sure it is, actually. You know,
let's give it. You know,
let's give it the whole I believe.
Yeah. So, we talked a little bit about your writing, and we'll come back to it. But I want to talk a little bit about your son. Mm-hmm. What's your son's name?
My son's name is Taika. Which means, okay, so we discovered it in New Zealand. Before he existed, and it means in Maori it means tiger, and then in Finnish it means magic, which totally sold me on it, and then in Japanese I think it means godlike person and big house. which is kind of like a lot to live up to. It's all those things, but I love it.
It's a great name.
I just love it.
How's it spelled?
Taika.
Yeah. Yes.
And it's really funny because he says it Taika.
Yeah. How old is he now?
He is 10 months.
Yeah, so he's still a little itty bitty.
Yeah, he's tiny.
Still a little itty bitty. Can you tell me a little bit about your story about Taika?
So Taika is adopted. My husband and I were talking about adoption since our third date. So it was something that I had been thinking about, and he had been thinking about. I feel like I had been thinking about it forever without realizing I'd been thinking about it since I was a kid. And when we started talking about it, it sort of like gelled as this thing that was going to happen, to the point that we were like, well, if we get pregnant, then should we start the adoption process right away so that they're really close? Like, it was going to happen no matter what. But then we just, like, let's see, yeah, I guess was that already that last summer? August, something, July. We said, okay, let's just start the process. Let's start it. And we knew it took a long time, and we thought we were going to do international adoption, and then it ended up being domestic adoption. And everybody always warns you that everybody's really afraid of domestic adoption because of the opioid crisis. And
I didn't even know about that. So
yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, so there's a huge percentage of kids that are put up for adoption whose birth mothers are opiate addicts. And so that's like there is an opioid crisis across the United States, and that's part of the reason why people are afraid of domestic adoptions. But we sort of just said, okay, we're gonna jump in and see what happens, and
those
what
kids are the ones that might need it the most now. So.
Yeah. So, and then of course you go into it saying, well, I don't want, an addicted baby or, whatever, but then the process is the process. So we went in completely open to race, gender, anything. Like, we were just like, okay, let's go. And we had 2 failed adoptions, one after the other. What's the process
like? Like, once you're like, okay, we're going to do this, and we're going to fill out the forms. Like, what do those forms consist of? Like, what is it? Like,
it's like a huge packet. It's like biblical. I mean, there's like a lot of forms, and you think you're done, and then you're not done. They do a home study. You have a social worker that does a home study, which means they come to your house, and then they interview you. And when they come to your house, we lived at an apartment at the time, and you can't move. And if you move, you have to do the home study all over again. So then they interview you together, you and your husband, or a partner, or whatever the situation is for you at the moment, or you if you're on your own. And then they interview you separately, and they do that a couple of times, and then they come a couple of times to your house as well. And at some point there's this home study that gets created, and it goes into the adoption package. And then there are different avenues. We went through an agency. Because we found out through a social worker that this agency had a surplus of birth mothers here in Miami, like in North Miami. And so we thought, okay, let's go. And let's go through that. We talked to lawyers. There was like a long process. It's like a labyrinth. Sure. Yeah. That's the murkiest part of the whole thing, because you're just like, where am I? Like, what do I do? You go online, and it's like, I had so many like web pages open at once. I was like, I don't know what to do. So I just started to talk to people. It's super confusing. I just talked to one person after the other, and then finally found this agency, and we decided just to go through with that agency and a particular social worker. And then you got
to choose the social worker too?
We chose the social worker.
Oh, cool.
For us, not for the birth mother. Right. And then we created a little profile, which is like a little book of it's like your family story, and then the birth mothers choose you. So they're given a bunch of the profiles, and they choose who they want, the family that they want. And so we had like I said, 2 people that chose us that fell through. One was at the very last moment, like we had baby stuff already. We were at the hospital. We went to go pick up the baby, and she didn't sign on the dotted line, which is very not common. Like the director of our agency is always like, when you tell your story, make sure that you tell them it's not a common story to have 2 failed adoptions in a row. And then an adoption that comes along that happens so quickly. So then like we had lost all this money and we're like, we can't afford to continue. And so we were going to like back out of the process for the moment.
This was the first time?
This was after the second.
Okay.
We just thought, okay, we can't keep going. We don't really have the funds. We didn't have the funds to keep going because you lose the money, that certain amount of money that you put down, and then
which essentially is the money that would be going to
the birth,
yeah,
and to the, you know, to like, so basically we were like, you know what, this needed to happen. Those two babies needed to come into the world the way that they did, and those mothers needed to decide that on their own, and they have 48 hours to decide after they give birth, which I believe is a wonderful part of the process, to give all that time to think through and really make sure, even after the 9 months, you know. So in the end, we like came to terms with all of that, but at the same time we were like, we can't continue. So I had written this email that I never sent for some reason. I just didn't send it. I was like, oh, I just in the draft, it's fine. What are the chances? What are the chances that we're gonna get called again? And then one day in January, I was in the middle of Amparo, like literally in the middle of everything, and we get a phone call and the director says, listen, we have a birth mother that has signed off already, and she told us to choose the parents, and we've chosen you. And if you want this baby, there was no prenatal care whatsoever, and we don't really have documents, and you have to come the day after tomorrow. And we're like,
what?
Okay.
What?
Yes. And so
Did you still have all the baby stuff that you had before?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, well, there's that at least.
And so we were like, okay, yes, let's go. And so he was 2 days old, and he weighed 4 pounds, 5 ounces. He was tiny, but he was super healthy. They let him out of the hospital. It's crazy. And here he is.
Yeah. Can you describe the moment you saw him for the first time?
God. It was like, he was like this little tiny little like elfin tiny. It was so tiny, like the newbie, like the preemie clothes was big on him. And
he was premature?
He wasn't actually. He was like basically either full term or almost full term. We're not really sure because she didn't have prenatal care, and so it was hard to tell. Mm-hmm. But she had smoked during the pregnancy, and that it affects the size and the weight and all of that. But other than that, it was really healthy. And an incredible act of love that I think is so amazing is that she was an opioid addict, and during the pregnancy she said she didn't do any drugs, and when he was born he was totally drug free. She said she smoked and she drank and she didn't. So I was like, wow, you know, I felt like it was, yeah. And so we were in the agency, and they brought the baby, and I mean, I have that picture. It's amazing. Like, it was like, you can see my husband in the back, like kind of freaking out, like, oh my God, but in this wonderful way, you know. And it just right away, it was like, oh, it's my son. There was no other feeling. Like, it was immediate. Like, it just felt completely like he had chosen us, and it was like completely. And ever since, I was like, I love him more every single day. It's crazy.
You know what's interesting? Crazy. That, like, I feel, because I'd seen pictures of Tyga. I hadn't met him till today, but I'd seen pictures, and you would have no idea that biologically he's not, like, he has mannerisms that are from both of you guys. So it's just it's so interesting. And it's so true. Like, he chose you, and this is where you guys are, and it's just like, you guys are just beautiful little.
I feel like he the day before, this is one of those crazy things that if you do believe in things that are bigger than you, the day before, it had been such a tumultuous time, and right the day before we got that phone call, I was lying in bed, and I felt this little guy like crawling over me. Like, I just like had this weird vision, like this feeling, and it's stuff that he does exactly. Like, now I'm like, oh, that was totally him. He was like, I'm coming. Like, I totally think that when he does that in the morning, he's like crawling all over us. I'm like, it's like, yeah, okay, I got that.
There was a feeling he was coming. Do you think that as a mother your writing has changed?
Yeah. Interestingly, it's really funny because I was reading my, like the evaluations of my students who are all, like they're college kids, so they're in their 20s, and, they were saying all this stuff, and one of them wrote, she's like a second mom in her class. I was like, oh my God, that's so, like, I actually started crying because I was like, oh, I kind of feel like sometimes you need that in college, when you're away.
And also to hear that, like, because you're so young, you know what I mean? So it's just like to be like, whoa, that's me.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I do feel like what it's done is it's cut out all the fat of the things I don't need in my life. And everything that doesn't matter, I just don't do. And if someone's, just like all the things that are not important to the writing or to life or to work or to my family, or it gets cut out. There's not enough time, and there are bigger things, and somehow the trajectory has become very clear, and I didn't understand that having a kid, a baby, and a family and all of that would affect my work in that way, which is like this like precision of like, no, I can't take that project because that's just gonna get in the way, you know what I mean? So it's like
that's great. It puts you on such a higher level of consciousness kind of thing.
It's a totally different thing. It's so interesting. It's so weird. So that's great. More careful also, it's like and nothing stresses you out as much because it's like, well, this is not like the person I have to keep alive over here. This is like, this is a thing I have to keep alive, but, speaking of the writing, but it's not, it put things into perspective,
So talking about that, you are teaching at a college, you're teaching at SCAD.
Yes, Savannah College of Art and Design.
Yeah, which is a great school, and that awesome. Kind of fell on your lap, right?
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about that.
I had been teaching for a while, for many years, adjuncting, and like after the professorship I did, assistant stuff and that sort of like, adjuncting mostly, and I thought, this is kind of like slavery. I mean, it was terrible. I thought it was not the way that I wanted to teach. I really love teaching, and teaching so many classes for so little money, it's not good for anyone. It's definitely not good for the students. It's not good for anyone. And so I just stopped doing it, and I said, I'm just going to focus on my writing. I'm just going to focus on my work and my writing and my work and my writing, which is what I did for 2 years. And then this was like, I've always focused on my writing, but meaning aside from teaching. And then this past summer, I got a phone call from SCAD. I actually got an email saying, are you interested? We've found, we're really interested in your work and what you do, and we would like to talk to you about a professorship here. And I was like, what? This doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's very
is
rare.
This a spam call?
Yeah, I was like,
what is happening?
And then I was really busy. Like, I had just gotten a Sesame Street fellowship. And
whoa,
yeah,
you have to talk about that later. Okay.
I was really busy, so I was like, sure, whatever. I was totally ignoring it, and meaning I was going through the motions of it. So they would say, okay, well, let's have a phone call. I had the first phone call, and I was like, okay, and then I kept working, and then another phone call, and then another phone call, and they were like, okay, so we'd like to fly you out to Savannah and Atlanta, and I was like, what is happening, And then when I get like, I was so sort of like not paying attention to the process that I didn't realize that I was having like full on interviews and presentations when I got to Savannah, where I was like being interviewed by panels and the dean of the school and everyone, and I was giving a presentation for a class, and then shortly thereafter they offered me a full professorship.
Whoa.
Yeah, so I was like, okay, I guess that happened, and then I had a decision to make. But what ended up happening was that I was working with Sesame Street. I had just gotten this thing that I'm still doing, a 2-year project called the Women's Project, which is based in New York. I have to be there the first 2 Mondays of every month for 2 years. And so I said, okay, if this happens, I was talking, to my husband about this, because if this happens, I have to live a tri-state life, basically between Georgia, Florida, and New York, Miami, Savannah, and New York City, which is what I've been doing. And that decision was insane because I have a baby, as we've just talked about, who's been coming around with me and has more miles than
I know. I saw him in pictures and I was like, yes.
Yeah, he goes everywhere. He's better on an airplane than a car. Like, he's just like hangs out on an airplane. It's really funny. But yeah, so it was really hard at the beginning to sort of figure it out. Now we're kind of in a groove. We've got a groove going on. And yeah, I love it, actually.
So the Women's Project flies you out.
The Women's Project does not fly me out. They actually, their application says you have to be in the tri-state area. And I was basically going to be at that moment until Savannah happened. And then they were like, as long as you can get here, it doesn't matter. You still have this fellowship.
Yeah. Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah. So what I do is I have a creative partner, basically, who when I'm in New York, I stay at her apartment, and when she's over here, she stays here, and so we have like a back and forth, and it's nice.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's super nice.
So it ends up working out. Yeah.
Okay, can you talk about the Sesame Street Fellowship?
Yeah. So the Sesame Street has this thing called the Sesame Street Writers Room, and they are trying really hard to get writers of color into writers' rooms in kids' TV, because for a long time they've been representing characters of color on, like, but not written by, and so they have felt a little bit inauthentic sometimes, and they fall flat a little bit, and they're not quite there, and so they're making this huge effort to get, Latin writers and Black writers and Hispanic writers, like everywhere from all over the place, Asian American writers, to come into the writing room, and then they share those writers with all the networks. So basically, it's this amazing
awesome opportunity.
Yeah, like really stellar opportunity. And then you're in the room with these 5 people that have been chosen from all over the world. I had one guy from South Africa, one Indian American, Asian American, me, Cuban American, like just, yeah.
Whoa, that's awesome.
Yeah.
And especially now, that,
Yes.
With Taika and everything, like, what a great time to be writing,
Kids, yeah.
Yeah.
It's really cool. It's really, really cool. Like, we went to go to actual, like the Sesame Street set, and I was like, wait, I was like playing in like Oscar's garbage can and Big Bird's Nest, which is ginormous, and like it's like, God, I can't believe I'm here.
It's so cool. Sesame Street did like a live taping at the Miami Children's Museum once.
Yeah.
And so they were in rehearsals, and so I got to like sneak in and see their rehearsals.
They're
And
so awesome.
it was just the coolest thing. It was like Elmo, and he was like, "Rah, rah, rah," and then he would like he would mess up, and he'd be like, I messed up, and he would keep going and stay in character. And I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life.
The puppeteers are amazing.
It's that's so cool.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
What has been the hardest thing about this, like, try living in 3 states?
Childcare.
Yeah.
Really, really, because it's been this thing where he's too little. He's too little for, it's very hard to hand your child over to strangers, and so it's been very hard to find, trustworthy people in new places, and so that process has taken me forever.
Yeah.
So that's been the hardest thing. The rest I was kind of used to, in the sense of, like, I'm used to traveling on my own. I'm used to, my husband's totally supportive. He's a back and forth. He's not an artist, but he has like the heart of one. So, and he's completely, he knows who I am and is more than happy about that. And so that wasn't, none of that is an issue. The hardest thing has been childcare and making sure that he's okay during all of this.
Right.
And like, being in Savannah on my own at some point and having like him projectile vomit for the first time and get a virus, and you're like, oh my God, I don't have a doctor here, and just like all that stuff, which is like new mom stuff that happens already, and then it's like, oh, it's happening again in Savannah and now in New York, and
man, but like, what an awesome opportunity for you now. Like, this is so great,
It's great. It's really great. It's really, really great. And I'm just like, you know what? Before he's 3 years old, where like they have to like hunker down in school, like out of place, whatever.
Yeah, you're doing it. Yeah. You're doing it. And you know what? For him too, just to experience all of these things. Yeah. Just he's gonna start school at 3 years old, and he's gonna have the mind of a like 5th grader. Like, so that it's so great to expose.
Yeah.
What do you think is something that has taken you completely out of your comfort zone while doing research for a project or, you know, searching for a project or, you know.
It's funny that Cuba is so comfortable, so home, and so out of my comfort zone all at the same time every single time I go. I get so stressed out when I go to Cuba. It's so stressful because I have all of this baggage of generations of escape, of just like pure tragedy, you know? Yeah. And I carry that with me, and I think it's going to be like all, you know, wonderful. And then I'm just so, like, I always get back from Cuba so, like, sometimes sick and sometimes just like so tense, you know, and just drained. Like, I have to sleep for a day, which I don't have time for. But then, you know, it's like, you just, it just really sometimes, like, if you talk about comfort zones like that, and then it's like every time I leave, it's like I'm not going back for a long time, and then the opposite happens. It's like, when am I going back? I have to go back. So it's just this push and pull, which is what it is. You know?
And it's so interesting, especially going over there and just seeing like the people and what they perceive and what we know, and like all of these different things. And it's just like, how do you balance that when you speak to the locals over there, when you speak to people that are tourists that have no real clue about what's going on, you know? Totally. And my experience when I was in Cuba was like, I was just so shocked by the double currency kind of thing. And that was just like, it was like genuinely really scared. I was like, oh, I don't know what currency, you know, and like, I want to help you people, you know, I want to be like supportive to the economy, but like, how do you do it, you know? Yeah.
And it's really interesting when you go and you're with your family and you're working off of pesos and versus the cooks, and like, you're like, okay, this is a totally different story. And there are, you know, you go to those certain places and there's the two lines. Right. You know? It's just so, that's so messed up.
Yeah. Man.
Yeah. I don't know.
That's, it's a whole nother story.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother story, a whole nother wine bottle. Definitely.
Yeah, I know.
So what is the next place that you want to visit? Where do you want?
Croatia.
Cool.
Yeah, I totally know.
Cool. I'm dying to go to Dubrovnik. I'm like,
oh my God.
I'm like,
I have a book right over there because that's what I did with New Zealand. I just like kept the book there until it happened. And so I told my husband, I was like, if the next project that happens, like the next little thing that happens that's big, we're getting the tickets. That's it.
Good.
It's happening.
Good.
Yeah, it's going to be the reward. Yeah.
Do you follow Scotch cheap flights?
I do. Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah.
They're great.
Yeah.
I thought I saw Croatia recently.
Really?
Like, yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah. No, it's coming. It's coming.
Yeah,
I'm like, I look at it like an addict. I'm like, but I never have that.
Yeah. Where do you want to go? Huh? What about you? New place?
I really want to go to Turkey.
Yes.
I really want to go to Turkey. That was like, I think I'm going to do a Denver trip in March. Like, I think I'm going to stay in the States just because financially I think that's what I can do. But definitely, if out of state, out of the country, Turkey. I want to fly into Istanbul and be in Istanbul for like a couple days, and then take like a 3-hour trip to Cappadocia, which it's like the capital of like hot air balloons, and it's like in a beautiful desert, and I really and then like be there for like a week, and then go back to Istanbul, be in Istanbul for a little bit, and then
But in the meantime, Colorado is great.
Yeah. In the meantime, Colorado will give me some sort of a different pace than like straight Florida, you know, no mountains, no nothing. But so I'm hopefully at some point this upcoming year in 2019, I'm gonna do it.
I'm crossing my fingers. Croatia in June 2019.
Yeah,
that's
you gotta speak it into existence.
Yeah, totally. I'm like, June 2019. That's what's happening.
Yeah, awesome. So, talking about places we want to go, what would be your ideal, like, day off?
Oh, you know? God, I don't even know.
I wish you guys could have seen her face when I said that.
Oh my God. You know, I like, oh my God, I can't even think about it.
It's interesting.
So hard.
And the thing is, like, you get, like, I haven't had a real day off in months, but I've had, like, from like 1 p.m. off,
Mm-hmm.
which is such a luxury, but then
Yeah.
I don't know what to do with myself.
It's
I'm
so
like,
bizarre.
I'm like twiddling my thumbs,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
it's like I don't want to watch TV, but I want to be home, but I also don't want to
Yeah.
spend it at home, you
Yeah.
know, so like.
I think something that I really loved doing when, like, my husband and I were, like, getting to know each other is we would walk from, like, we lived in Brickell, and we would walk from Brickell all the way to the Grove and then have lunch and then, like, do the next thing. And that would be, like...
That's a pretty long walk, actually.
It's a really long walk. But it's so great because you just talk about all the things that you've been meaning to talk about, or then you just have these quiet moments and you enjoy Miami. You look up and you're like, oh yeah, this place is amazing. This place is like really idyllic, you know? Mm-hmm. Those kind of long walks that end up, you know, in food, like a nice lunch or brunch or dinner or something, you know, with some family and just like, yeah, family and time, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, it's just what to do. I mean, I say that looking forward to the fact that from the 22nd till about the 27th is going to be the first time off I've had in forever. I don't even remember.
Really?
Yeah, from the 22nd of December, I'm like, 22nd to the 27th, it's going to be no work.
And are you flying somewhere?
Yeah, to LA, because my sister lives in LA with her husband and her 2 kids, and yeah, we're going to fly over, and my mom and my stepdad, we're all just going to go.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
That's exciting. They get to see the baby. I'm sure they're like super stoked about it.
Yeah, totally.
Have they met the baby?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now they get to hang out, like, my nephew is a year and a half, and Tekka's 10 months, so they're kind of like, you know, one's crawling and one's walking just now, and then my niece is like big boss lady.
Oh,
you know, she's like 3 years old, and she's the best. She's amazing. Yeah.
So to end the episode, we like to end it on what's going on, what's new. So what's something new that you've done recently?
I bought a house.
Congratulations.
The house we're in right now is, you know, yeah.
It's a beautiful house.
Thank you.
I love this house.
Thank you.
And it has an iconic red door.
Yes, it does. It has a red door, which we just painted. But yeah, that was a big thing, you know? It was like, are we going to do this? And we bought it right before the scat offer came. So it was like, well, we're going to lay down the roots anyway, you know?
Yeah.
So that was like a big step that's been so wonderful. I'm like, I love my house.
Did you always know that you wanted to buy a house here in Miami?
No. I was a gypsy for such a long time that I didn't, you know, I thought, oh, I'll just have these little apartments everywhere or whatever. I don't even know what I thought until, you know, suddenly last year at some point I was like, I want a house in Miami. And then it started to progress really quickly at some point, you know, like, yeah, this year.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And is there anything new that you want to try? Something new on the horizon that, you know, like, I've been wanting to do this. What should I do?
I really, really want to do more TV and film stuff. And I know, like, I'm getting obviously into like kids TV stuff, but, you know, I just recently started recording on screen the research I do. And so, like, I'm just venturing into what that might mean. And I'm not sure yet, you know? It's like you were talking about starting this podcast, right? Like, wanting to do something for a really long time and you're not really sure what or where. But there's something about, you know, a different medium that I want to explore in a way that I haven't. And I kind of feel like a little bit of an artistic reinvention coming up this year in those terms and others, maybe, you know? Like, so I sort of feel things shifting in an interesting way. Yeah,
I feel that way too, actually, towards radio. You know, it's you know, I'm primarily an actor. I am an actor. That's all I do. Everything that I do is acting. But then recently, you know, with the podcast and just, you know, everything, all these transitions going on in my life, I'm like, man, I'd love to do radio. I'd love to kind of try something new and like really just finding another art form that can reach people. In a massive way, you know, and just like, and just being inspired by people and being able to inspire in some way people, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think audio, this form is so fantastic because you're like, whenever you're on the go, I know that when I'm in my car, like I take road trips all the time because I'm coming from Savannah to Miami sometimes in the car, or you know, I'm in a plane, or I'm walking in New York and I know I'm walking for that in your like the stories in your ear, you know, like I'm always listening, always, and it's so different because your brain does something that's not the same as when you're reading something or watching something.
Yeah.
It's sort of like you have the world around you and then this story in your ears, you know? It's kind of awesome.
And there's also something so comforting about being able to listen to something and know that people aren't watching your every move with their reactions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think that that's what I like about radio and podcasting and, you know, just even listening to music, you know, if I'm listening in headphones and nobody knows what I'm listening to and I start laughing, like that's just such a, it's very freeing. It's a very freeing moment, you know? Just to be like, well, this is where I am right now and nobody else in the world needs to know exactly why I'm doing it. Or like if I'm in my car, I see myself listening to like talk shows or podcasts and I start, you know, like mouthing something, you know, I'm just like, no, if someone turns to me right now, they're gonna be like, what is this girl doing?
Yeah, but it's total immersion. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah,
it's cool. So final thing, if there was something that you can tell your younger self, maybe like 10 years ago.
10 years ago, okay.
You know, or yourself maybe like right out of Barnard or something like that. Like what would you say to that self? Because you're, you know, obviously things get hard, but your life right now, I believe you are somewhere where you would like, where you want it to be, you know what I mean? So what would you tell your younger self? Or
one, I would say it's going to be okay, believe it or not. Really, because there were moments where it really didn't feel like that. And I think I would say have more fun. Be with people more. I felt like I had so much work to do and like so much to catch up to other people that had a better start than I did, that I worked so hard that it isolated me sometimes from other people, and other people are so wonderful. And I feel like I would have said, you know, be with people more, have more fun, you know, and it's gonna be fine.
It's gonna be
good.
Fine.
It's gonna be all right.
It's gonna be fine.
More than fine. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming to the podcast. I'm so excited. I can't wait for everybody to hear this. Yay! Thanks again for listening to the We're So Young podcast. Like what you've been hearing? Help spread the word. If you haven't already, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, or wherever you get your podcasts. Rate, review, and tell your friends about We're So Young. And don't forget to follow us on our socials at We're So Young Podcast on Instagram, at We're So Young Pod on Twitter, and We're So Young Podcast on Facebook. Let's all get inspired to try new things together. That's it for now. Tune in on the 1st and the 15th of each month for new episodes. Until then, step out of your comfort zones and try new things, 'cause we're so young.